Ouji is a Japanese fashion substyle. It is not a board game. It is heavily influenced by clothing from the 1800s, but it has a very fantastical twist. It is very similar to the style of Lolita, but they have different shapes and pieces overall. I have been wanting to wear stuff like this for years, but I haven't had the chance to. Until a few months ago, I had to go to a wedding, and I needed to make the fancy clothes because I didn't have any. So this was the design that I had in mind. I wanted it to be a fitted top that pointed at the bottom. It would get a little wider around the hips so that it wouldn't rumple under the vest on the torso. It would have big poofy sleeves, all one width, that would gather into a cuff around my wrist and would poof around my hands. I wanted a fitted vest to go over it that is both a fit, texture, and color contrast because it'll be a stiffer gabardine fabric. I also wanted there to be lace around the collar and a bow. The vest would lace up the center. I wanted the shirt to be green because it's a little easier to wear green in a desert. I wish it was all black. I should have gone with gray, but... So I was looking around for patterns that kind of fit this general vest shape, but I couldn't find any until in January this pattern dropped. It was very funny. I was about to spend money on a different pattern because this hadn't shown up yet, and I was very lucky that it came out at the time that it did. I also think I'm quite lucky that people who are generally around my height and bone structure, petiteness, tend to make clothing patterns. It's very helpful because otherwise I would have to reshape something that I'm wildly unfamiliar with. And so I decided on using this black gabardine, some black poplin for the lining, and this cotton ribbon. When you're making clothes to go over clothes, I am selecting my size from the pattern based on my measurements when I'm wearing clothes, because all of this extra fabric adds stuff, you know. It adds maybe anywhere from like half an inch to honestly maybe even an inch, depending on what sort of things you're wearing underneath it. If I were wearing like a t-shirt or an undershirt underneath the dress shirt, that's a lot of fabric. And even so, I set down all the pattern pieces. I never cut out the pattern pieces because I want to be able to mess with the design, and I feel like if I draw over or cut out the original, then if I want to make changes to it, I won't get to. Okay, so I just finished cutting out all of my patterns and stuff, but the fabric that I was going to use to make my mock-up, it was a fabric that I had ruined on accident, and so it was just kind of sitting there. I was like, oh, it's perfect for a mock-up. It turns out that I don't have it. I think I may have gotten rid of it or thrown it away because I ruined it, and I thought, oh, I'm never gonna use this. Bye. And so I dug through my little box of fabric that I have, and I have half of a yard of black satin. It's not as thick as I would like for a lining, or for a mock-up it's fine, but I also don't have any fabric to line this vest. And so I'm going to make my mock-up out of this really nice black satin. I'm going to try to also make my neck bow out of it. I think I can fit all the pattern pieces on it just barely enough that I can have that neck bow. If this mock-up fits, I'll make the adjustments that I want to it directly, and then I'll make it the lining for my vest. Yeah. Okay, so I made the mock-up out of the little satin that I had left. I basted the sides because they're not supposed to be sewn together yet. And I tried it on and I almost ripped it. I'm wearing a shirt to kind of simulate what it would be like to wear a dress shirt underneath it, and I made sure that the measurements over my shirt were reflected in the size that I chose, but my gosh, it is very tight. And I know that it's going to go half an inch in, but this is way too close to, it's in my armpit essentially, and it's not very comfortable. The front is also going to be half an inch of seam allowance. It might be enough space, and I mean, as it is, I don't know, it's just, I can only think of one solution at the moment, and that would be to add a strip of like an inch of fabric onto the sides, because it is too tight. The back is too small. The back is kind of too small, yeah. So that I actually have room to breathe, I'm going to cut off half an inch the entire way around. And I'm gonna lower the back neck because I'm gonna be wearing a collared shirt. It has to reach about right here. It's kind of worrying because I was hoping that it would just be my lining, but it's too tight for me to do anything with at the moment. Okay, so I literally just put an inch of fabric onto the sides, and all of my problems with it are completely fixed. It fits me nice and well, and the shoulders are more centered. They aren't falling off my shoulders. However, I did decide to buy a poplin lining for this. It would be stiffer. My original idea was for it to be poplin because I'm not sure if I like how flimsy this is. So I go back to making the patterns. I put the patterns on the table as per usual, and I remove the bottom inch or so off of the armholes. I have my mock-up with me so that I can see if there's anything that I want to change, but again, very little. I remove part off the back like I said that I would, and I add an inch onto the sides of the back panel specifically. I make sure that the seam allowance stays the same shape. I lay out all the new pattern pieces on some gabardine fabric, fold it over once so I only have to cut out every piece once. They're more similar that way. And I cut them all out. I make sure that the little angular lines, because gabardine has like a little diagonal line on it, I make sure those are matching up. I make sure everything is right side out on the direction it's supposed to be and all the good things. I followed the pattern as the video goes, and it was kind of hard to figure out, like, when you sew a curve together, you have to pin a concave and a convex piece of curved fabric, like the convex and concave line together. It was kind of hard to figure out which one you pull more or less to make the curve like smooth and not wrinkle in bad places. I had to redo it a couple of times. I actually redid this one and made it lie a lot more flat. The tiny little wrinkles disappear when it's ironed out, but that part took a try or two to figure out how to not make it do that. My poplin lining finally came in, so I also sewed it the same way as directed. I sewed the shoulders together, all of the parts together, I left the sides open, etc. I really liked the fabric. It was turning out really well. I was going to press it, top stitch it, both sides before I did anything more, putting them together. Okay, I have been, get this thing. Yeah. Okay, I've been following the vest tutorial and I got all of the stuff, basically the outline of the vest sewn, except for where they meet at the side seam, and I'm gonna have to turn this inside out and pull it through that like 1.5 inch space, so I hope that's possible. I'm scared. But I don't have any sort of interfacing to make the front area stronger, but I do have canvas that I'm not going to use, that I could theoretically use to put a strip of it here and see where that takes me. What I will do though, once it's flipped inside out, is top stitch on the outside of it where the grommets would be, next to where they would be, so that it's evenly spaced, but I don't know how big my grommets are. It's a bit past midnight, but I didn't use canvas. Oh man, you can't see this. Okay, I think you can kind of see it here. I didn't use the canvas. I ended up using another strip of the gabardine fabric. Oh my gosh. I didn't sew pockets. I didn't put pockets onto my lining. Oh no. Oh my gosh, I'm the worst. I was supposed to do that. No. Okay. It's not all hope is lost. Yeah. Not all hope is lost. I can figure something out. Okay. Anyway, I used an extra strip of gabardine and sewed it onto the inside of the vest, so that when I turn it inside out, it'll just be an extra strip of it there to help reinforce the area that the grommets are gonna be on. Oh my gosh, I'm so upset about the pockets. Okay, so my first thought with the pockets is that since the sides of this vest are open, so I could sew a little square right there, or right there, maybe. I might be able to fit it there, but oh man, oh no, pockets. I was gonna put cool pockets on the inside. And I was able to fit the entire front of the vest through that little shoulder, through the little shoulder strap. So yes, no worries, it is possible. So I'm going to tell you real quick how I made the pockets. So after I had everything sewn together already, the sides were still open. I actually sewed together the outside of the shell. I sewed the sides of the shell together, but I didn't sew the sides of the lining together yet. So what I was able to do is I cut up my old mock-up into tiny little squares, and I pinned it onto the inside of the lining. And I was able to fit the tiny bit of my sewing machine over it and sew the sides of it and it managed to actually be the perfect size of a plastic card just by eyeballing it. It was perfect. It was amazing. I also did a very sloppy hand stitch to do the sides, but I think it looks cool. I think that the weird visible stitch thing looks really cool. Honestly, I wish all my clothes had that on the outside. Okay, this next part took ages. I don't particularly wish to think about it again, but I shall. So I decided upon 8. Really? 8? Yeah, okay, 8 grommets. And I measured out them to space them out and everything, and decided on what the gap would be so that it's all even. I marked it out with my soap bar. What I decided to do was, so that the fabric wouldn't pull and get all over the place, I top stitched along the line where the inner reinforcement panel is to keep the stuff from stretching or warping horizontally. And on each mark, I pin where every single grommet will be at its center to keep the stuff from warping vertically. What you don't see is off camera, I spent like an hour trying to figure out how to push an awl through 3 layers of fabric. I eventually figured out a way. Here is sort of the theory behind it. So say you have this fabric, bunch of vertical and horizontal threads, you have the starting place where you want the center of your grommet to be, and you're trying to spread it out to this giant circle measurement that is way too big, and you have no idea how to get it there. So you start trying to spread the threads out in like a circular shape, but once you reach a certain distance, you encounter a lot of tension from the fabric. It starts pulling the threads in the direction, and you can get runs, and the threads next to it don't want to be pushed. So what you do is you trim the little inner threads, and that lets them stretch more, and it lets the ones outside of it get pushed, and you have your fabric spread into a circle while keeping the threads at the base of the grommet intact, because that is the most important part. The threads in the center, I don't think they don't really matter. What a lot of people do for this is they will punch a hole in the fabric that is like a 1/4 of an inch or 2 smaller than what they actually need it to be. So if I had a 1/4 of an inch grommet, I would maybe do like an 1/8 of an inch hole punch or something like that, and then I'd push that forward. But yeah, I don't actually have an awl, I have a mechanical pencil. The base of the mechanical pencil, the conical metal top part, is the same diameter that I need, and so I'm using it. I start out first with an upholstery needle, and I stick the upholstery needle through the fabric at the center, and then I take my giant scissors and I try to trim just the barely insides of that hole that I made, and then I push it onto my pencil. And I try to push that fabric to the base of that conical metal part, and whenever the fabric stops being pressed down, I take it off and I trim a few more threads, and then I keep going. And after a lot of time, I get to the bottom of the metal bit, and I am able to put the bottom of the grommet on. I don't do anything to it yet. I pin it in place, and then I move on to the next one. I keep it in there so that the fabric, stays together. And I do this for all 8 grommets on this side. And then I go to the other side. It took like an hour for each side or something heinous like that. However, I really, really, really should have measured both sides at once. I know that when I measured the first one, I spread all my grommets out evenly and I had special spacing. It didn't even matter. It didn't matter because the 2 sides of my vest, their heights were different. different. I don't even know how. I know how it could happen, even though they were identical pieces of fabric. Say that when I'm sewing, if I accidentally undershoot or overshoot my little seam allowance marker on the side, it would make the piece either bigger or smaller than it was supposed to be. Or say, for instance, when I was trying to press my fabric before I top stitched it on the outsides, right side out, curled inwards and it didn't get pressed out flat all the way, and I top stitched that down, then it could also be smaller. And at this point, I was too afraid to try to spread them out. I didn't want to spread them out evenly over the new piece. The spacing would be too big compared to the other side, and it might make it like rumple a little bit trying to match. I also didn't know if the other side of the fabric stretched, even though it's not on a bias, it's not stretchy, it shouldn't have stretched. I didn't know if anything changed because of the grommets that I put in on the other side, or if anything would change after I washed it and dried it, so I just decided to do something in between. I spaced the grommets out evenly over the side, and then I slowly smudged some of the grommets upwards to more evenly match the distances on the other side so that they'd be even horizontally. And some of them are still a little bit lower than the others, but not a whole lot. It's honestly negligible. But after that, I got my trusty little mallet, and I attached the tops of the grommets to the bottoms that were in the fabric. That part was surprisingly difficult. I did not film it because I was hunched over the ground for half an hour. However, I will talk about this. I do not like the little hammery grommet thing. I ended up going with nickel-plated copper. I figured it was never going to touch my skin, so I didn't really need to worry about the nickel. And the copper was going to be very soft and everything, easy to, hammer instead of me trying to pick like a stainless steel one. Goodness forbid I tried to find a titanium grommet so that I could wear it against my skin. Goodness, no. It was a two-piece, attachment tool. There was a bottom that would hold the grommet in place, and then there was a top that you would whack into it. It was very hard making sure that the teeth of the grommets were sticking in the right direction because A, I couldn't see them, but B, I could not tell if the top was completely parallel to the bottom piece. And if I was even slightly off, the grommet's teeth would bend inwards into the center hole of the grommet. Some of the times I had to try to pull them back out with pliers, or if it was too bad, I just replaced the grommet entirely, but I got them all on. And they looked great. It was great. I threw the whole thing into a laundry bag so that the grommets wouldn't get scratched up. I washed it, I dried it. My giant spool of purple ribbon arrived the day before we were supposed to leave, and then it was done. It feels really funny saying that I have mixed feelings about this vest. For this result, I wore a t-shirt under just so that you could see the difference on it, not being on black or something like that. Wearing it, I finally got to see the result of me picking a size that was somehow too small and too large for me. I think someday I will try remaking it and mixing together pattern that is 3 sizes different than the other one that I want to match it with. But I do like it. I like the fit. I like the pointiness, and that I actually get to wear a vest, which I've wanted to for years, since I was a kid. I love the ribbons lacing up the front. I think it's a very pretty color contrast, and the grommets are all shiny. Also, I think if I were to make this in the future as a costume piece, I would honestly replace the back with something like an elastic fabric so that I can move around in it while the front is all stiff and everything and presentable. It can be very difficult to breathe in. A lot of the times I could not extend my ribs all the way, but if I loosened up the front and wore it kind of more loosely around me, I was able to breathe just fine, so it wasn't even that big of an issue. But if I were trying to like use it in some sort of costume piece, that would be something that I'd want to consider.